What is up, you guys? I took 45 grams of creatine monohydrate a day to see if it would increase my DHT and if I would get kidney failure in the process. I do these experiments to test myths. There's one study from 2009 to show that it increased DHT, and now everyone that is afraid of hair loss is avoiding DHT. So like, all right, no one that I know of has actually done DHT blood work online that I could find ever, so I'm gonna do it, see if it actually works and if it will destroy my kidney in the process. Alright, so the way I tested it, because here where I am, the country, we can't do blood DHT. They just discontinued blood DHT and I have no other option except this UMAP test. So it's a full urinary hormone panel that looks at progesterone metabolites, basically allopregnanolone, etc., your androgen metabolites and your cortisol metabolites and estrogen metabolites. So it's a fascinating test, very in-depth with all of the hormones and metabolites that you can actually would be interested in. So the first experiment that I did, or when I did this UMAP test, was after using Thymoquinone and Skullcap. I was using Skullcap at the time to see how effective of an aromatase inhibitor it is. It is fantastic. I wrote an article on that. Link will be in the description below. Now, both Thymoquinone and Skullcap has been claimed to inhibit 5-alpha reductase and lower DHT. So that was the baseline test that I did. The second test was Butea Superba, again to see if Butea Superba would increase DHT. Again, there's a case study, just one case study, where someone in Thailand used Butea Superba, it increased their DHT, and no one online has ever, as far as I know, tested Butea to see if it increased DHT. So that, again, that's why I did it. So that was my second test that I did. The third test was with 45 grams of creatine. So here is what happened. This was fascinating. So as I mentioned, the study that they did was in 2009. It was 16 rugby players. DHT went up by 56%. They did a loading phase for 1 week where they used 25 grams a day, just 1 week. And then they dropped back to 5 grams for another 2 weeks, for 3 weeks. So in the first week, DHT went up by 56%. And then when they decreased the dose, it stayed at least 40% over baseline. Now, in 2025, there was a follow-up study where they used 5 grams a day and DHT did not move. So it felt like case closed. But to me, it looked like, okay, if you use 25 grams of creatine, it might actually increase DHT. If you use 5 grams, it will probably not. So maybe there's like a dose-dependent effect that is needed to increase DHT. So the things that I really want to get into here with you guys is that you have DHT, and then you have the testosterone-to-DHT ratio. You have your total androgen pool, and I'll get into that. And then you have androsterone, you have the backdoor pathway. So all of this is what I will discuss, not just DHT blood work. All right, so my hypothesis again is 5 grams, no increase. 25 grams, there was a 56% increase. What would 45% do? And the reason why I did 45 is because originally I just wanted to do 40 grams. So I took a heaped tablespoon of creatine, I weighed 3 of them, and it came down to 45 grams. It's like, okay, the experiment is 45 grams now because it's just easy to take 3 tablespoons throughout the day. Here's what happened. First test on the scale, that this is the metric that they use. So 12 is not the same metric as that you use in blood, right? Okay, 12 is actually at the top of the reference range here. My DHT was 12 during Thymoquinone and Skullcap. It dropped to 5.6, like almost like more than half dropped on Butea Superba, and then basically normalized on the creatine. Now, my testosterone to DHT ratio was 13:1, and then it increased to 23.2, which means that in the Butea article, I discusses that my testosterone dropped a little bit, but in proportion, my DHT dropped significantly more, so the ratio got significantly worse. And then on the creatine, the ratio between testosterone and the DHT was basically normalized again, but actually better than with a Thymoquinone and Skullcap. So if you look at just this, it would seem that creatine did not increase 5-alpha reductase or DHT, given that my DHT just normalized back to what it was on the Skullcap and Thymoquinone. So this is why you want to look at the backdoor pathway. The backdoor pathway is an alternative route to the production of DHT. The standard route is from testosterone to dihydrotestosterone. The backdoor pathway is where DHEA or androstenedione, which is the direct precursor to testosterone, is rather converted into androstenedione that can then also convert into DHT or androsterone. So if you supplement DHEA, you will see a little bit of an increase in testosterone, but it's going to be quite minor depending on the dose that you take. But you will see a disproportional increase in DHT and androsterone because DHEA goes through the backdoor pathway to DHT and androsterone. That is the backdoor pathway. The reason why this is important is that my backdoor pathway was significantly up with creatine. On Skullcap, it was in the middle, and then on increased with Butea. Now, if you remember from this one, testosterone can convert back into androstenedione. So androstenedione can convert to testosterone and back. All right. Now, I'm using testosterone for muscle building purposes. So my testosterone level is set. There is no endogenous pathway feeding it. So the fact that androstenedione went up would suggest that on Butea, I had enhanced deactivation of testosterone to androstenedione. And then on creatine, it dropped to a 1, which means it's the best yet, which means that I had less conversion of testosterone to androstenedione on creatine. In terms of androsterone, this is the green one here, it also significantly dropped, almost half on Butea, and then it increased again on creatine, that you can see is higher than where it was. So on creatine, my androsterone was higher than on the Skullcap experiment. Again, it dropped significantly on Butea. Then we have the conversion multiple, where you look at the androstenedione to androsterone ratio. How effectively is androstenedione converting to androsterone via the backdoor pathway? This is the purple line. It increased massively on creatine, which means that my backdoor pathway was significantly upregulated when I used creatine. So I was still creating androsterone, and despite testosterone not really being converted into DHT at a higher rate. It just means my backdoor pathway was upregulated. It was still a win. It still had an androgenic effect. So this is the total androgen pool. So if you look back at this graph, you can see, and this is just like a minor representation actually of all of the steroids. The total androgen pool would be DHEA, androstenedione, testosterone, androstenedione, DHT, androsterone, etc., etc. All of these hormones are the androgen pool. So if all of them improve, the overall androgen pool is actually increasing. So again, DHT dropped on Butea, increased or at least normalized on creatine. The testosterone to DHT ratio basically normalized, was actually a little bit better on the creatine. Testosterone significantly increased, and then my total androgen pool basically normalized what it was to Skullcap, but my androsterone overall levels were significantly higher. And to me, that's important. There was a study where they gave men testosterone, and the men that got the greatest increase in androsterone experienced the greatest increase in libido. So it's not just that testosterone and DHT are the main important hormones. You have these other hormones like androsterone that's also extremely important that have additional benefits. Androsterone is also a positive modulator of the GABA receptor, which is important for enhancing the signaling of GABA. So if someone is predisposed to OCD, hyperexcitation, anxiety, depression, androsterone is extremely helpful for them. And I think this is a big reason why creatine actually has mood uplifting benefits for a lot of people. It's because it increases androsterone levels. Now, this is exactly why just doing a DHT blood test is kindergarten science. Now, I think if I were able to do a DHT blood test, I would have done it because I still would have been interested to see what is happening in the blood. Where a test is a urinary test, so you only see what the kidney is excreting, but you can still look at the absolute amounts on repeated tests and also the ratios between all of these different hormones. So it's not a useless test. There's still a lot that you can learn from it. But ideally, I would have liked to do both. However, if you just do a DHT blood test, you miss out on looking at the total androgen pool, all of the other related androgens, the ratios between the androgens and cortisol, the androgens and estrogen pool, and the estrogen metabolites, because that's how you actually see if you're estrogenic or not, and not just looking at total estradiol. And then also the total progesterone pathway going to allopregnanolone, because all of these have unique and important neurological effects on the body. So the point here is that I do think that a UMAP test is significantly better than doing a blood test. If I had to choose between the two, I would just do the UMAP. But if I could do both, I would do both. And by doing the UMAP test, this is how I could have seen that the backdoor pathway increased a lot and how androsterone spiked so much. Now, in terms of kidney, I think this is where a lot of people's like, all right, now post your kidney results. Let me show how your kidney got destroyed. So obviously you can see I'm still here, I'm still alive, I'm not on dialysis. But the thing is, like, my creatinine did obviously skyrocket and my eGFR did tank. If a doctor looked at that test, it would have seemed like I got stage 3 kidney failure. So my creatinine was 157 and the upper limit is 110. So it's just like way over the upper limit. And then my estimated GFR was 50, right? So that is basically stage 3 chronic kidney disease diagnosis. If a doctor was looking at this, dude, you're doomed. Get the hell out of here. Getting on dialysis right now. Now, the thing is, like, I was actually feeling great. My blood pressure was fine. My hydration was on point. My energy was fine. Now, symptoms can be deceiving, but in general, I was feeling really good. My training was progressing. My mood was fantastic, etc. This is why you don't want to look only at creatine-based or creatinine-based eGFR. You want to look at cystatin C. Now, important caveat is that it's an eGFR, which means it's an estimation of it. They looked at your creatinine and then estimate your filtration rate. It's not actually your filtration rate. So even with cystatin C, it's also an estimation, but it's on a different marker, not creatinine. Because creatinine can be influenced by creatine intake, muscle breakdown, lifting, protein intake. There's a lot of variables that can affect it. Whereas cystatin C is not that manipulable. So it's a much more stable marker to actually look at. Because it's produced by all nucleated cells at a constant rate. It's not affected by muscle mass or diet or creatine supplements. It's not a breakdown product of creatine. Filtered exclusively by the glomerulus, a direct measure of filtration rate. It outperforms creatinine in detecting early chronic kidney disease and high creatine population. And my cystatin-based eGFR was 118, which represents absolutely amazing kidney function. So there's nothing wrong with my kidneys. And also, there is no research to show that creatinine itself is harmful to kidneys. So just the fact that my creatinine was elevated doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that it was actually causing damage to the kidneys. And so lastly, beyond hormones, why would anyone want to take creatine? Now, if you are eating a high protein diet, you probably don't need it. But some people are undermethylating, so they could benefit from it because your body's spending about 40% of its methyl donors to create creatine. So you can actually spare that so that the methylation can be used for other stuff like detoxification, hormone synthesis, etc., or neurotransmitter synthesis. But creatine can also help a lot with endurance and recovery. There's a lot of more recent studies that shows that higher doses can be great for bone density. It helps with cognition and against cognitive decline during sleep deprivation. It has an absolutely amazing safety profile. It's almost like this even if you don't get benefits from it, there's no risk of actually getting side effects from it. Now, obviously, some people do get side effects. They get bloating, they get diarrhea, etc. But they can offset it by taking a different form. You can take Creapure, which is a much purer form, but that doesn't mean that's going to solve it. You can take the HCl version. You can take, which is the precursor to creatine, so your body can create its own creatine. But in general, creatine is a very beneficial compound to take. Does this mean you have to megadose it? No, this was just an experiment that I did because the higher dose that you take, the more likely you are to see an effect. So will you be able to get that increase in androsterone like I did with 45 grams if you took only 5 grams? I don't know. Maybe not. But I do know that people that take 3 to 5 grams often also notice a mood boost. So this could be related to androsterone. It could not be. But in general, it is a good compound to take. Now, if you don't feel anything from it, there's no need to take it. Anyway, I hope this experiment was insightful. If you would like to check the full article, because I talk about methylation, estrogen, how creatine affected a lot of other blood markers as well, full article is in the description below. Alright guys, thanks for checking. I'll check you in the next one.